In 2009, the Pope caused controversy, which means anger or disagreement, by suggesting that Africans should not use condoms to control HIV/AIDS, but should remain faithful instead. This caused huge amounts of problems, considering that millions of people in Africa have HIV, and many are also Roman Catholic. The statements made by the Pope were criticised by many other Christians for being potentially dangerous. Liberal Christians usually argue that contraception is acceptable. However, Roman Catholics and other strict Christians may still argue that it isn't. So then, there's strong disagreement amongst Christians, with some arguing that contraception is acceptable and others arguing that it is wrong. Liberal Christians usually argue that it's acceptable. This doesn't mean that they think it should be used as an excuse to be promiscuous or have lots of casual relationships, but that it can be used by married couples in order to limit family size. As the main teaching is to love others or show agape love, they argue that contraception is a good thing because it helps women financially, physically, and emotionally. They also argue that it can protect against HIV and AIDS if you use the condom, and that there is nothing in the Bible forbidding these things. This explains why some liberal Christians are actually involved in projects that help provide contraception for people who are at risk. Conservative or strict Christians, however, often argue that sex is meant for procreation, i.e. to have children. Some Christian families then are still very large. Other evangelical or fundamentalist Christians might allow natural family planning methods. This limits family size by limiting sex to times when a woman is less likely to get pregnant in the month. This is statistically the least effective form of contraception, but by some it's seen as the only acceptable one. As Roman Catholics follow the Pope, many agree with his teachings on contraception as well. Pope Pius XI condemned contraception in 1930 and in 1968. Pope Paul VI's statements called the Humanae Vitae confirmed this. It is also written into the Catechism or the Roman Catholic law. If you've got too much spare time on your hands before your exams and you want a long read, you can check it out on the Vatican website where all the different laws are listed. Anything that's seen as killing a potential life is considered a sin because God told Adam and Eve to procreate. In Genesis 1:28, which you've heard before, it specifically says to be fruitful and multiply. Contraception works by preventing the sperm from reaching the egg. In the case then of condoms or the pill, this actually prevents fertilisation from happening and therefore goes against the rule to be fruitful and multiply. The morning after pill is considered to be even worse. This actually happens when fertilisation has already taken place. According to Roman Catholics, this means that life has already begun, so ending that life, even a day later, is considered murder. Muslims also have very different attitudes towards contraception. Muslims generally believe that contraception should not be used to prevent people from having any children, because children are seen as being a gift from God, although once you have children yourself, you might on occasion doubt this. The family is very important in Islam, so people should eventually try to have a family of their own. That said, some more liberal Muslims argue that contraception should be allowed between married partners in order to limit family size and protect the health of the mother. God is said to allow this because several hadith, or example of the Prophet, permit the use of coitus interruptus as a means of contraception. That's the withdrawal method in more common speak. Now that more modern forms of contraception are available, surely these would be acceptable if the withdrawal method was acceptable to the Prophet. Furthermore, if pregnancy is likely to cause death or extra burdens on the family, contraception can be used, as the Quran says that God does not want to place extra burdens on families. Suicide is also wrong, and going through a pregnancy that's likely to lead to maternal mother death is wrong too. As always, there are people who strongly disagree. They would argue that contraception is going against the will of God and should never be used. The Quran might not mention contraception, but it does say you should not kill your children for fear of want. They argue that this entails a ban on contraception. And of course it's that old chestnut that God created sex for the purposes of procreation. And since contraception prevents this, it goes against the natural order of things. Muslims believe, as you will know from the life after death section, that abortion is considered to be wrong after 120 days. As a result, they might argue against the morning after pill, but they may well not. The morning after pill is different to normal forms of contraception because it takes place or ends the embryo once it's already been fertilised, whereas other methods of contraception work by preventing pregnancy. For your exam, you should read up on different types of contraception, what different types of Christians and Muslims think about them, and your own arguments. Remember to discuss why some people think that contraception goes against the natural order of things, and why some people even think that the morning after pill ends life. On the other hand, be prepared to use your old favourites, the Golden Rule and Agape Love, or Love Thy Neighbour, to explain why some people think that contraception is the most loving thing to do. In the case of Muslims, you can only use the Golden Rule since Jesus said to love thy neighbour, but you could still argue that Muslims argue it's the most loving thing in certain cases. Be Fruitful and Multiply is also a Christian-specific rule, but you can definitely use that in a different form for Islam by saying that God would want people to have a family.